I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 6 English lesson on figurative language. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 6, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our subject, of figurative language. All right. So our chapter is figurative language. Our subject is English, which is language arts. Grade 6. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of figurative language is to classify figure of speech, it's to interpret figure of speech, and it is to use personification, right? So that is our lessons that's going to be under figurative language. All right. And when it comes to figure of speech, right? All right. So when it comes to figure of speech, there are different figures of speech, right? So we have different figures of speech. It's like sayings, right? It's like words or phrases that we use. That is figures of speech. It's like words or phrases that we use. All right. And with our very first figure of speech is, firstly, we said figures of speech are words or phrases that use language in a non-literal and unusual way. They make writing more expressive, right? Which means that we are not saying something literal. We're saying something figuratively. It's not saying something that is directly, literal, as if we really mean what we're saying, right? All right. So once again, right, we said figures of speech are different words, or it can be phrases that we use, right, in a non-literal or in an unusual way. And usually when we use like these different kind of figures of speech, right, and then it is to make writing more expressive. It's to express ourselves even more, right? So alliteration. So alliteration, right? And alliteration is the repetition, right? It's like repeating of something. The repetition of sound at the beginning of nearby words. All right. So once again, we said alliteration, right? It is the repetition. It's like we are repeating. It's a repetition of sounds, right? At the beginning of nearby words. The repetition of sound. We are repeating the sound, right? For example, what a lucky, lucky little lady you are, which means that we are using alliteration or the repeating of sound by lucky little lady, right? That is our alliteration. That is a repetition of the words or of the sounds right at the beginning of our nearby words. So lucky little lady, right? Then we have an allusion, right? An allusion, it is a brief reference to something or to someone well known. It can either be from history, right? Or history, or it can be from literature. For example, I'd better get home before I turn into a pumpkin, Leela remarked. And if we think of someone turning into a pumpkin, right? Think of the Cinderella story, right? When she goes to the ball and then it is like the mice and all those type of animals, smaller animals, they turned into either a horse or a carriage or something in order to make her beautiful. And in a certain time, when they said she had to be back, all of those things either turned back to a pumpkin or whatever they had changed it from. So we can say an allusion is a brief reference to something or to someone well known, right? All right. So now if we look at an example, right, of an allusion, it says, I'll better get home before I turn into a pumpkin. And once again, that statement or phrase, right, it refers back to Cinderella. All right. If we look at another one, right, we say an idiom. So an idiom is an expression that cannot be understood literally. All right, so we said an idiom, right? So we're going to underline the word idiom. And we say an idiom is an expression that cannot be understood literally, right? Because with an idiom, right, it's like we say something, but it means something different, right? So its meaning must be learned. All right. So once again, we said an idiom is an expression that cannot be understood literally. All right. So now we are going to, for example, use the word. So we're going to look at an idiom, right, and express the word, right, without using its literal meaning. It says the assignment was a piece of cake. Who has heard that word already? It's a piece of cake. All right. So if we say the assignment was a piece of cake, what does piece of cake mean? Piece of cake. The assignment was a piece of cake. All right, no problem. All right, so we have figures of speech, right? Figures of speech can either be words or it can be phrases that's used in language but in a non-literal or an unusual way, right? This is a way of expressing either your excitement, your joy, or whatever you are now expressing it. So when it comes to figures of speech, we said it is words or phrases that use language in a non-literal and unusual way. It's like me, let's say, for example, I say something, but I don't say something directly. It's like I'm saying something that is in a manner in which it is not directly or literal. It's like it's almost like I'm saying some form of saying that means something, but it doesn't directly mean what that saying actually means, right? And that is why we come in now with our other words such as alliteration, allusion, idiom, simile, metaphors, right? That is now where we come in with that, where we are not going to say how can we express, let's say, our figures of speech or our figurative languages within those for example, paragraphs. So, for example, if we say alliteration, alliteration is a repetition of sound, right, at the beginning of nearby words. And that is, for example, we say, lucky little lady, right? All right. So when we use figures of speech, right, it's like they are making the words more expressive. It's like using, that is why I'm saying, if we look at the word idiom, right, look at this idiom, right? An idiom is an expression that cannot be understood literally. So if I just say something literally, it cannot be expressed. For example, a piece of cake. The assignment was a piece of cake. We cannot say the assignment was a piece of cake, meaning it in a literal way, because an assignment is not cake. A cake is not paper, for example, right? So if we say the assignment was a piece of cake, then it means that piece of cake, it means something in a literal way, but we are saying this now in a figurative way. And that is what we mean with figures of speech. All right. So if, like, once again, if we say that assignment was a piece of cake, then it doesn't mean necessarily like it is a piece of cake, it's a slice of cake, right? It just means that that assignment was easy, because that is basically what a piece of cake means. It's like saying that that thing is easy, right? So it's like we are saying all these expressions, but we are saying it in almost like in a non-literal way. It's like we are not saying it directly. If we now look at, for example, a simile, right? It says a simile uses like or as to compare things that are not actually alike, right? For example, my cat's fur was as dark as the night. So which means that we are now basically kind of comparing our cat's fur to the darkness of the night, right? Which you cannot really do, right? Because if you look at the color of, let's say, the sky, right? Or as dark as how the night is, right? Then sometimes maybe it is not as dark as what we exaggerate with how dark the cat is, right? So once again, we say the cat's fur was as dark as the night. So we know nighttime is dark. We know nighttime is dark. So now they are trying to compare the fur of the cat, right? Or the fur of the skin of the cat compared to the darkness of the night. All right. Then we have a metaphor, right? So we said with a simile, we use like, right? Or use as to compare things, two things that are not actually alike. And now we have a metaphor, and a metaphor compares two things that are not actually alike without the words like as. So we say that we are comparing two things that are not actually alike without using the word as. So remember, with similes we use as and like, but here with the metaphor we are using only like as. For example, the snow formed a blanket over the town, right? So metaphors compares two or the two things that are not actually alike without using a like or use. Sorry, using like or as. That is without using it. All right. So if we look at an example of a metaphor, right? We said a metaphor, it compares two things. Two things are being compared over here, right? And it is not actually alike, right? For example, the snow formed a blanket over the town. Does it mean that it is a little blanket? No, it's not a little blanket, right? But we are comparing the snow to, for example, how the clouds are basically formed over the town. So that is how it's now basically being compared. So the snow, not even the snow, sorry, the clouds, the snow. The snow formed a blanket over the town. Means that it was snowing quite hard, it was snowing a lot, right? And then we have an onomatopoeia, right? Onomatopoeia. And this involves using a word, right, that expresses a sound. For example, the scrambled eggs hit the floor with a splat. So now this is almost like how you are kind of trying to explain a sound, right? And you say, for example, gunshots is going, it's like you're making a sound, right? So now I know that the sound, right, that is how the gunshots went, right? Or if you, for example, say the sound of a snake, then we'll say that is what type of sound, for example, we can say the snake may be made. Or we can say that the door made a screeching sound. The word screeching will give us the idea that it is an onomatopoeia, right, which involves using a word to express a sound. And then we have personification. And personification is giving human characteristics to a non human thing, right? For example, the trees dance in the wild, in the wind. The trees dance in the wind. And then we have a pun, right? Before we go into the pun, we said personification is giving human characteristics to a non human thing. Guys, here it says the trees dance in the wind. Do trees dance? No, trees do not dance. But here a comparison is being made where we say the trees danced in the wind. right? So that is basically, like we say, giving human characteristics to non-human things, right? Then we have a pun, and a pun involves using a word or a phrase in a humorous way. Like humorous is a kind of funny, right? Way that suggests more than one meaning. All right, then we have a pun once again, and it says a pun involves using a word or phrase in a humorous way, right? That suggests more than one meaning. A great new broom is sweeping the nation. Can we use our broom to sweep a nation? No, right? We cannot just use a broom to sweep the whole of the country, for example, right? So we have a pun, and it involves words or phrases in a humorous way that suggest more than one meaning, right? It's like saying the, a great new broom is sweeping the nation. In English, we also say like a new broom sweeps clean, right? All right. So we said we use, if we say a great new broom is sweeping the nation, guys, we cannot say one broom will sweep the whole country, right? So we are actually saying it in a much more figuratively relaxed, kind of jokey way. That is basically what they mean, right? Then we have verbal irony. Verbal is like basically what you say. Irony, it involves saying one thing but implying something very different. So it's almost like I'm saying one thing, but then I'm doing the opposite of what I was saying. And people often use verbal irony when they are being sarcastic, right? Sarcastic is where you don't want to say something directly to a person. So now it's like you're kind of speaking, you're telling them, but you're saying it in a more sarcastic way, like in a verbal irony type of way, right? All right. So these are basically figures of speech. It is words that is used that is being used in a non-verbal way, right? So figures of speech, it is words or phrases that use language in a non-literal or an unusual way, and they can be written, and when we write it, right, it is being used to express ourselves or to be more expressive whenever you need to write. All right, so classifying figures of speech, right? We made a mention of For example, the different forms of figures of speech, right? And now it says the hum of the computer concerned met. Was the problem the power supply or bad hard drive? So the hum of the computer concerned met. Was the problem with the power supply or hard drive? Right, so if we look at this one, it says the hum of the computer concerned met. The hum, right? Was the problem the power supply or the hard drive? So in this case, we know the power, or let's say the problem, the situation is, for example, the humming sound. So now they're actually saying the sound, or they're telling us the sound that was being made, and we say that is onomatopoeia, right? Because of the sound that is being made within that sentence. We held our breath as the basketball made an arc towards the basket and then sunk into the net with a satisfying whoosh. We held our breath as the basketball made an arc towards the basket and then sunk into the net with a satisfying whoosh. All right. We held our breath as the yeah, we can also say it is onomatopoeia because we are talking about, if we're saying that the sound it made a whoosh sound, then we can then say with onomatopoeia it involves the words that is being expressed through sound, right? It's being expressed through sound. So that is onomatopoeia. Yes. Now, if you look at the next one, right here it says, if you're going to become a true dodge baller, then you've got to learn the 5 Ds. Dodgeball, right? Of dodgeball, it is dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. What type of figure of speech do you think that is? That is a specific figure of speech. That is a figure of speech, especially if you are repeating. What type of figure of speech is that? So if we say, for example, they've learned the 5 Ds of dodgeball, which is dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge, then we can say that is alliteration, because alliteration is a sound at the beginning of nearby words. So it's alliteration. And then also when it comes to the D for the dodgeballs, we said that is a alliteration. It is the first words of sound, but it is made in a non-literal form, right? Right. So this figure of speech, we said it is alliteration because it is the repetitive or the repetition of song of sound at the beginning of the words. It's a repetition of sounds like d for dodge, duck, dup, dive, and dodge. Right. Those are alliterations. All right. All right. And we said that is alliteration. All right, let's go to our test. Because alliteration is the repetitive of sound, right? All right, so now it says after the stock market crash, many people's financial futures went into free fall. So after the stock market crash, many people's financial futures went into free fall. So after the stock market crash, many people's financial futures went into free fall. Is that an allusion or is that an alliteration? All right. So after the shock of the stock market crash, many people's financials went into fall. Do we say that's an allusion or do we say that's an alliteration? All right. So it's like financial futures went into free fall. So we can say over here, let's call it an oh. Oh, it's the financial futures free fall. Okay, so when it comes to alliteration, guys, alliteration doesn't have to be all four or five words next to each other, right? There can at least be two other words in between, but as long as they're showing the repetition of the sound, right? That is now alliteration. The brush grabbed, the brush grabbed at his legs in the dark until one knee of his jeans ripped. All right, so we say the brush grabbed his leg in the dark until one knee of his jeans ripped. Is this a personification or is this an idiom? The brush grabbed at his legs. Do brush grabs at our legs? So the brush grabbed at his legs in the dark until one knee of his jeans ripped. So we need to choose the correct figure of speech, whether it's of personification, human like characters, or if it's an idiom, personification or an idiom. All right, and in this case, all right, let's say personification. All right, so personification is correct. So well done. Human characteristics. Problems emerge and some people try to sweep them under the rug. Is that an idiom or is that an illusion? Problems emerge and some people try to sweep them under the rug. So problems emerge and some people try to sweep them under the rug. Do we say that is an idiom, sweep them under the rug, or it's an illusion to sweep them under the rug? All right. And if we choose the correct one, we can say, let's say it's an idiom. Yes. Because remember, it doesn't mean literally that we are sweeping them under the rug, right? It means something, right? So when problems arise, what we do is we don't address it, right? We just try to ignore it. But it's like saying that when we, it's like sweeping, for example, the sand or the dust under the rug. But eventually, one day, you're going to have to lift up that rug and you'll see all of the sand or the dust that's laying there. So that is what they mean when they say sweep under the rug. It's like with people's problems, right? They don't address the problem, they just sweep it under the rug in the sense of, next time when they bring up the specific problem again, they're going to bring out more things, right? And the fights will become bigger. All right, let's do the last one. It says, I got hit in the head by a can of soda. Luckily, it was a soft drink. I got hit in the head by a can of soda. Luckily, it was a soft drink. All right, then if we choose the correct one, we can say, I got hit in the head by a can of soda. Luckily, it was a soft drink. So that is a pun. Usually people will be like, oh, no pun intended, right? All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on figurative language. We only actually went over classifying figures of speech, right? But next time we will go over interpreting figures of speech as well as to use personification, right? And remember, we said figures of speech It is either words or phrases, right, that is being used in a non-literal form or non-literal way, right? It does not mean directly what the words or the phrases mean within those sentences. All right, so this is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade 6, for joining our class. Really hope you're going to have a good evening further. Goodbye. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson. Right, goodbye, and have a good evening.